Mickey Cohen was asleep in his Brentwood fortress when the bomb hit on February the 6th, 1950. 2 o'clock in the morning on Monroe Drive, Brentwood, Los Angeles. A neighborhood so nice the lawns looked like they were cut with scissors. Mickey and his wife, LaVon, are asleep in a house reinforced from the floor to the ceiling like a man who's expecting trouble and has a budget to prepare for it. And then the whole front porch disappears. A bomb tears through the foundation, concrete, glass, wood, all over the place, raining down on a street where people pay good money not to have that kind of thing happen. Mickey and LaVon, they walk out of the rubble, and what does the man say? He's not upset about the attempt on his life or worried about his wife. He's furious because the blast destroyed a lot of his suits. He had 200 custom tailored suits. He has 200 suits. That's a lot of suits. That bomb was the 6th time somebody tried to kill Mickey Cohen. There'd be 5 more attempts after that. So, well, I guess he's so well liked that he ends up with 11 attempts on his life in total. And he survived each and every single one of them. He got a bunch of his suits blown up, and he's treating it like somebody had keyed his truck at church. Now, in 2013, Warner Brothers released a film called Gangster Squad. Sean Penn played Mickey Cohen. Ron Gosling and Josh Brolin ran around 1949 Los Angeles in fedoras shooting Tommy guns. The movie looked great, felt like a noir comic book, and it earned a 30% on Rotten Tomatoes, which honestly, that is what it deserved because the film turned a complicated, bizarre, very fascinating man into a screaming psychopath. Hollywood gave you their version, but here's what actually happened. Meyer Harris Cohen, born September the 4th, 1913 in Brooklyn, New York. When full grown, he would stand 5 foot 5 inches tall. He was a Jewish kid from a Russian immigrant family. He was a failed professional boxer with 7 wins and 11 losses and 1 draw. He owned 200 suits there for a while, and get this, he washed his hands 50 to 60 times a day. As I said earlier, he survived 11 assassination attempts, and never once was he ever convicted of a violent crime, but they did get him on taxes twice. Now, this story is how a kid who could not read or write climbed to the top of the Los Angeles underworld, and how the most feared man on the West Coast was terrified of germs, and how America's most famous preacher, Billy Graham, tried to save Mickey Cohen's soul. And Mickey basically told him, "Thank you very much, but no thank you, but I appreciate you thinking of me." He stated he was born Jewish and he would stay Jewish until the day he dies. There is a question I keep coming back to, and by the end of this, you might not have an answer either. How does a man survive 11 murder attempts, 2 federal prison sentences, a 3-foot iron pipe to his noggin, and the full weight of the Los Angeles Police Department hunting him down for a decade, and still die in his own bed? How does that happen? I guess you took notes from John Dillinger and decided not to do what he did the way he had done it. Now, Mickey Cohen was born the youngest of 6 children to parents who barely spoke English. When Mickey was about 9 years old, his mama packed up the kids and moved them to Boyle Heights in Los Angeles, which at the time was not the kind of neighborhood you see on real estate listings. Now, little Mickey started selling newspapers on the street at age 8, and get this, here's something you need to understand about this kid. He couldn't read or write. He had to have somebody tell him what was on the front page so he could yell it out to people walking by. That kind of explains what happens to him a time or two later in life, you know, the tax thing and all. You know that I mentioned that earlier, right? Now, by the time he was a teenager, Mickey was trying to rob movie theaters with a baseball bat, which is kind of like that's about as sophisticated as breaking into a house by driving a truck through the front wall. He got sent to reform school, and that's where he learned to box. At 15, he moved to Cleveland all by himself to become a professional fighter. And on April the 8th, 1930, he wins his first pro bout against a guy named Patsy Farr. So you might think, well, maybe this kid has a path out. But then, as luck would have it, or, well, It sure wasn't good luck. On June the 12th, 1931, Mickey steps into the ring with Tommy Paul, who would go on to become the world featherweight champion. Tommy Paul knocked Mickey cold in about 2 minutes and 20 seconds in the first round. That's faster than it takes a microwave a Hot Pocket, you know what I mean? That's pretty quick. His boxing record ended at 7 wins and 11 losses. That's a pretty rough record, but it is better him than me. So Mickey does what a lot of guys do when the straight path don't work out. He goes crooked. By 1934, he's in Chicago working for the people who used to work for Al Capone. And by 1937, the Chicago outfit sends him back to Los Angeles with a job. Organize the Rackets in Southern California. They send a 5'5" guy who washes his hands like 60 times a day and can't read to take over Los Angeles. But I guess you ain't got to read if you know what you're doing. Take over Los Angeles, huh? Well, that is what he did. He had a mentor named Benjamin Siegel. You know him as Bugsy, but don't ever call him that to his face because he would put you in the ground over it. Siegel was the man building the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas. It opened in December 1946, and it nearly bankrupted him. It's also connected to Meyer Lansky, Frank Costello, and Lucky Luciano. The whole national crime syndicate had their fingers in it. The syndicate had an enforcement arm called Murder Incorporated, which had operated out of Brooklyn and handled the kind of problems that they couldn't be solved with a phone call kind of thing. Mickey learned everything from Bugsy: how to dress, how to talk to the reporters, how to make powerful people feel like they were your friend. Siegel's girlfriend at the time was Virginia Hill, a woman who would later become famous for her own reasons. She testified before the Kefauver committee and claimed with a straight face that she had no idea where all that money in her bank account come from. With all the mentoring going on, there's one very important thing that Bugsy didn't teach Mickey until the end of his mentorship. And that was how not to get shot, which is kind of important if you don't want to get shot. Now, on June the 20th, 1947, somebody with a rifle shot a round through the window of Bugsy Siegel's Beverly Hill homes on Linden Drive. And that was the end of the lessons of the mentorship. After Bugsy's death, Mickey stepped right into the vacuum. He was now the de facto mob boss of Los Angeles. And the first thing he did was hire a private tutor to teach him manners and how to read and write. That is like becoming the CEO and then going back and getting your GED, right? But that was Mickey. He understood the job required skills he didn't have, so he had to figure it out. Here's how the operation worked. The opportunity was post-war Los Angeles. It was the fastest growing city in America. Money was just pouring in. They had gambling, bookmaking, prostitution. Hey, honey, how you doing? The whole city was wide open. The inside connection was that Mickey had the backing of the entire national crime syndicate. Lansky, Costello, Luciana, they all approved him. He was not some rogue operator. He was the franchise. The execution was straightforward. Mickey ran the bookmaking operations. He controlled the Sunset Strip, and he ran his Haberdashery on Sunset Boulevard. Now, I asked myself, what's a haberdashery? Well, it's a fancy name for a store that sells nice suits and men's clothing. Well, his haberdashery was called Michael's. He also drove a fleet of navy blue Cadillacs that were always spotless and had souped-up engines and hidden compartments for the guns and cash he was carrying. His Brentwood home had a soda fountain in it because Mickey didn't like to drink alcohol or smoke or do drugs. His vice was hot fudge sundaes. He also had a bulldog named Toughie. And Toughie slept in, get this, a miniature version of Mickey's bed with monogrammed bedding. That's right, his dog had monogrammed sheets. What the hell is all that about? Well, Mickey's biggest issue is that he couldn't be invisible. Not that he wanted to. He appeared on more than 1,000 front pages in Los Angeles newspapers. He threw money around. He courted celebrities and politicians and publicly and financially supported the congressional campaign of a young Richard Nixon. Can you remember a young Richard Nixon? I only remember him being old, like he must have been born old or something. Mickey was a walking headline, though, and in that line of work, That's the same thing as a walking target. Agents and investigators could never confirm exactly how much money was flowing through Mickey's operation at its peak. What they could confirm was that the IRS had no record of most of it. And you and me both know that's something the IRS takes personal. Mickey had two problems wearing two different faces. The first was Dragna, the old school Italian mafia boss in Los Angeles who considered himself the rightful king of the city. And he tried to kill Mickey over and over and over, and well, you get it. Dragna was a patient man who had been running things quietly before this loud-talking little guy from Brooklyn showed up and started making the papers. The second problem was the LAPD Gangster Squad, created in 1946 by Chief of Police Clements Horrell. It started as 8 men whose job was to keep the East Coast organized crime out of Los Angeles. Sergeant John O'Mara ran the unit. Now, he slept with a Tommy gun under his bed. His partner, Sergeant Jerry Wooters, was the kind of cop who would grab you off the street, throw your ass in a car, drive you up to the Hollywood Hills, and have what O'Mara later called a little heart-to-heart talk. I've also heard that kind of talk referred to as a come-to-Jesus talk, like you do, or let me say this again, do you want to come to Jesus now? Or do you want to do what I need you to do and come to Jesus later? O'Mara told the Los Angeles Times years later that they did a lot of things that they would get indicted for today. You know, going back to that last lesson that Bugsy tried to teach Mickey, though, in 1949, somebody shot Mickey in the shoulder outside a place called Sherry's Cafe on the Sunset Strip. He should have cashed out that night, but he was rich and famous, and he had survived multiple attempts on his life, so what's one more? He got through that attempt well enough to keep breathing. You'd think he would slow down after all that, but Mickey Cohen did not know how to be quiet, and he didn't know how to disappear. In 1950 and 1951, the Kefauver Committee, a Senate investigating into organized crime, it brought the whole underworld onto television for the first time. Everybody saw everything. Virginia Hill had already made her appearance before the committee. Mickey Cohen was the most visible gangster in America, which also made him the easiest one to go after. Here's the thing people always get wrong about Mickey Cohen, though. The legend says he was a cold-blooded killer, a raving maniac. Sean Penn played him like a guy who would bite your face off for looking at him sideways. The real Mickey Cohen was charming, entertaining, and had reporters and movie stars at his dinner table. He told jokes, he gave quotes, and he once described getting shot at while wearing a brand new camel hair coat. With his main concern, not that the bullets, rather it was that he didn't want to get bullet holes in the coat. He said he didn't want to drop to the ground when the bullet started flying because he didn't want to get his coat dirty. That's not a psychopath, that's a guy with an insane set of priorities, right? Now those two are very different things. And then there's the hand washing, 50 to 60 times a day. Mickey had obsessive compulsive disorder before everybody was calling it that. He showered several times a day, wore his suits a few times, then gave them away. And here's the part that's really hard to believe. In 1948, at Haberdashery on Sunset Boulevard, Mickey shook hands with a guy named Jimmy the Wetzel Fertino. The moment Fertino walked out, Mickey headed straight to the back room to wash his hands. And while he was back there, some assassins came in and opened fire. His OCD saved his life. The germs he was afraid of making him sick and killing him actually kept him alive that day. That's a kind of neat thing there. Then in June 1951, they used that same tax evasion thing they used on Al Capone. The deal with Al Capone is he was the most powerful crime boss in Chicago, and he went to prison in 1931 for not paying his taxes. The IRS don't care how many people are afraid of you. They care about how much, or they care about the column of numbers. That needs to add up, and you need to be paying taxes on it. So here we are 20 years later from Al Capone, the same type of government accountants using the same process, and they got the same results, but this time with Mickey. Mickey had survived 11 assassination attempts, got taken down by paperwork. He spent 4 years in federal pen and got out in 1955. And then he staged a comeback. And he started spending time with Billy Graham, the most famous preacher in America. Graham did try to convert Mickey to Christianity, and Mickey was polite but clear about it. He said, look, I was born a Jew and raised a Jew, and I have no intention of changing. And that's when 1958 happened. April the 4th, 1958. Mickey's bodyguard, Johnny Stoppano, had been dating the movie star Lena Turner. Stoppano was an abusive man, and one night he flew into a rage and threatened to kill Turner and her mother. Turner's 14-year-old daughter, Cheryl Crane, overheard the fight. So that little girl went to the kitchen, grabbed a butcher's knife, and crept back upstairs. And when Stoppano raised what she believed was a weapon, but it was actually a clothes hanger, she drove that knife between his ribs. He was pretty much dead within a couple of minutes. The coroner's jury ruled it justifiable homicide, and Mickey, who was loyal to his people even when his people were wrong, leaked Lena Turner's private love letters to the press. Not because it would help Johnny, because, he's dead already. It was because Mickey was a man who responded to everything with force, even grief. But the IRS was not done with Mickey. He got a second tax evasion conviction, and he got 15 years. That was more than Al Capone ever received, and that hit Mickey pretty hard because Capone was his role model. He went to Alcatraz first, committed there on July the 28th, 1961, and then became the first and only prisoner ever bailed out of Alcatraz. His bond was signed by a sitting United States Supreme Court justice. They transferred his ass to the federal penitentiary in Atlanta, and on August the 14th, 1963, a fellow inmate named Burl Estes McDonald walked up behind him with a 3-foot iron pipe and hit him in the head so hard that doctors had to pick skull fragments out of his brain tissue. Mickey was in a coma for about 2 weeks. But then, after he come out of a coma, they put a steel plate in his head. The bad part was that he was paralyzed for the rest of his life, partially paralyzed. The good part was he wasn't dead. The part nobody films is what came after, when Mickey Cohen got out in 1972. And he was not the same man. He still traveled around visiting old friends, including New Orleans mob boss Carlo Marciello, a man whose name would later surface in connection with some of the darkest conspiracy theories in American history, though that's a different story. So Mickey's own name surfaced briefly during the Patty Hearst kidnapping, though nothing was ever proven. The 5'5" king of Los Angeles was now a sick old man with a steel plate in his head and a body that had been shot, blown up, beaten beyond what any reasonable person should survive. Mickey's other associates wasn't as lively as Mickey. Remember Bugsy Siegel? He got dead at 41 when he was shot in his Beverly Hills home. Johnny got killed when he was 32 when that teenager stuck him with a knife. Now Dragna, he died in 1956 of natural causes, which in his case was probably the most surprising outcome imaginable. Jack O'Mara, he lived in old age, but spent his final years knowing that the methods he used would have put him in prison if he tried to do that, Jesus talks, come to Jesus talks today. No. Billy Graham kept preaching, but never did convert the one gangster he actually liked. July the 29th, 1976, Mickey Cohen died of a heart attack and liver failure at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. He was 62 years old. A man who had survived 11 assassination attempts, 2 prison terms, and an iron pipe to the head, died in a hospital bed. The most violent city in America couldn't kill him, but his body finally did. I guess that was attempt number 12, and his luck finally ran out when his body did him in. As for the movie, what he got right was the air, the clothes, and the car, and the fact that the LAPD, Gangster Squad, it existed, and it operated with methods that were, to put it nicely, legally questionable. What changed was almost everything else. Several characters who died in the film actually lived for years after 1949. Mickey Cohen was arrested in 1951 for tax evasion, not dragged out of a hotel in some dramatic shootout. The screenwriter admitted the exciting gunfights, didn't happen the way the movie shows it. And the biggest distortion is the ending, because the real ending's not a hero cop taking down a supervillain. The real ending is an accountant with a calculator and a filing cabinet doing to Mickey Cohen exactly what other accountants did to Al Capone 20 years earlier. The real Mickey Cohen told Mike Wallace in a 1957 interview, "I killed nobody I did not deserve killing. In all these here killings, there is no alternative. It was either my life or theirs." Well, that's the kind of thing a man says when he really believes it, and the terrifying part is that Mickey probably did believe it, and he was probably right. The most dangerous man in Los Angeles was 5'5", couldn't read until he was 34, washed his hands about 60 times a day, never took a drink, and made himself a hot fudge sundaes while his dog slept in monogrammed sheets. The truth is always stranger than the movie, because the truth don't have to make sense. Now, if you made it this far, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button and hit that hype button and drop a comment below telling me who you want me to cover next. This is Mr. V on The Hidden Lens.